Glass shattered somewhere inside the building before the fire even reached the walls. Valeria Nightflame stood in the snow-covered courtyard of Moonveil Tavern and watched the only thing she had ever rebuilt for herself burn down in front of a crowd of 200 people. She did not scream, she did not run toward the flames. She stood exactly where she was, hands trembling at her sides, and she watched. Because the man who ordered it burned was standing 10 feet away from her, and she refused to let him see her fall apart. Alpha King Elias Thornclaw did not move either. He stood in the middle of the destruction with his arms behind his back and his golden eyes steady, watching the roof collapse the way a man watches something he has already decided. Cold, controlled. Like the fire was simply another order being carried out correctly. She had spent 7 years building that tavern. 7 years of scarred hands and sleepless winters and stubborn, relentless belief that if she built one place where no one was turned away, not soldiers, not rebels, not wandering traders, not the wounded, then something good could still exist in a kingdom that had forgotten what peace felt like. He burned it in under an hour, and she swore, standing in that snow with smoke filling her lungs and sparks falling around her like dark snow, that she would hate Elias Thornclaw for the rest of her life. But fate, as it turns out, does not care much about what we swear in moments of grief. Because minutes after the roof came down, a poisoned blade found the king's side. And the only person in the entire borderlands capable of saving his life was her. This is the story of a woman who lost everything to a man she was destined to love. A mating bond neither of them asked for, a kingdom that needed saving, and two people who had to decide whether what broke between them could ever be the foundation of something stronger. Stay with us. It is going to be a long night. Hi, viewers. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something, and I want you to drop your answer in the comments right now. If the person who hurt you the most came back and needed your help to survive, would you save them? Not for their sake, not for forgiveness. Just, would you? Let us know below. And if you are new here and stories like this are what you came for, hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It lets us know you want more now. Let us get into it. Chapter 1, The Night Everything Burned. The first barrel exploded before Valeria Nightflame even reached the doors. She heard it from the kitchen, a deep, hollow crack that shook the walls and sent clay jars tumbling from their shelves. Then came the heat. Not a warm kind of heat. The kind that pushes against your chest like a wall. She ran. The western side of Moonveil Tavern was already swallowed in orange. Flames climbed the old pine beams the way hungry things climb, fast. Without hesitation, without care for what they destroyed. Travelers poured out of every exit. A woman screamed somewhere near the stables. Horses pulled at their ropes. Soldiers in black armor stood in a wide circle around the courtyard, watching, not moving, as if they had been placed there on purpose to make sure no one interfered. Valeria stopped at the edge of the courtyard. The cold frost-fang air hit her face. Snow fell lightly around the fire, melting before it touched the ground. She could see it all. 7 years of work, 7 years of scrubbing and mending and rebuilding, folding inward like paper. And standing at the center of it all, calm as a man watching a river, was Alpha King Elias Thornclaw. He was taller than she expected. She had only ever heard his name spoken in low voices, the way people speak of weather that could kill. He wore no crown tonight. Just black fur over black armor, a red-gold sigil of a wolf's head pressed into the chest plate. His golden eyes moved slowly across the burning structure the way a builder surveys his own work. Valeria walked toward him. The soldiers raised their weapons. She kept walking. She stopped 3 feet from him and stared up into his face. She had promised herself she would not shake. She did not shake. You had one order, the king said. His voice was low, even, like a man who had never once raised it and never needed to. Close your doors to the rebels. People came to my tavern for peace, Valeria said. Elias's golden eyes moved to her face. They did not soften. And they used your peace to hide a war. A beam cracked overhead. The roof groaned. Then a section collapsed inward, sending a column of sparks into the dark winter sky. The crowd stumbled back. Frightened travelers pressed against each other near the tree line. Valeria stood still. She felt something happening inside her chest. Not the loud kind of breaking. Not the kind that makes a person fall down. The quiet kind. The kind that rearranges everything and never quite puts it back the same way. 7 years. She had come to the Frostfang borderlands with nothing after the war. No family left. No territory to return to. Just 2 scarred hands and the stubborn idea that if she built a place where no one was turned away, something good could still exist in a kingdom full of old wounds. She watched the tavern burn, and she did not cry. She would not give him that. She was still standing exactly where she was when Kale Nightfang broke from the edge of the crowd, She almost did not see him move. He was quick, the way men who have trained in secret are always quick. He crossed the courtyard in 4 steps and drove a short blade into Elias Thornclaw's left side. Everything erupted. Soldiers swarmed, wolves snarled, someone tackled Cale into the snow and he went down hard, arms pinned behind him before he could reach for anything else. Elias staggered backward 1 step, only 1. His hand moved to his side and came away dark. His face remained still, but something shifted in it, something beneath the control, not fear, more like recognition. Like a man who had always known a moment like this would eventually arrive. He looked across the burning courtyard. His golden eyes found Valeria. She did not understand in that moment why he looked at her specifically. Why not a healer? Why not a commander? Out of everyone standing in that snow-covered space, his eyes found hers and stood there. Black veins had already begun to move beneath the skin of his neck. Wolfsbane. Her mind moved before the rest of her did. She had spent years treating travelers who crossed the wrong territories. She knew what wolfsbane venom looked like when it moved. She knew what it did to the body when it was left untreated. She knew exactly how much time was left before it reached the heart. Not long. A royal healer pushed through the soldiers and knelt beside the king. Elias shook his head once. A small, deliberate movement that sent the healer stepping back. His eyes were still on Valeria. She crossed the courtyard. The soldiers moved aside without a word. She did not understand why they moved. Later she would think it was because Elias gave some signal she did not catch. But in the moment she only felt the heat from the fire against her back as she knelt in the snow beside the Alpha King. She studied the wound. She studied the spread of the venom along his jaw and throat. She looked up at his face. "If I save you," she said quietly, "Cale walks free." Elias stared at her for a long moment. The black veins pulsed at his temple. "You are in no position to negotiate," said Commander Celine Darkmoon, stepping forward from behind the soldiers. She was tall and sharp-featured, the kind of woman who held authority like a weapon. Valeria did not look at Celine. She kept her eyes on the king. "Then let him die," Valeria said simply. Silence. Snow drifted down around them. Then Elias Thornclaw, Alpha King of 5 territories, ruler feared across every pack from the Frostfang Ridge to the southern flatlands, said 2 words, "Agreed." "Save him." Valeria pressed her hands to his side. The moment she touched him, something strange moved through her fingers. Not warmth exactly, more like a hum. Like the lowest string of an instrument vibrating somewhere she could not quite locate. She told herself it was nothing. She focused on the wound. Behind her, Moonveil Tavern finished collapsing. The sound it made was not loud, a slow groan then settling, the kind of sound a tired thing makes when it finally gives up. Valeria did not look back. Chapter 2, The King in Chains. The royal encampment sat 2 miles east of the borderlands, pressed into a shallow valley between 2 ridges where the wind could not reach it. 20 tents in a wide circle, a war banner on every pole. The largest tent sat at the center, and that was where they brought Elias Thornclaw, and that was where they brought Valeria. She was not chained, no one treated her unkindly. But she noticed, without needing to be told, that the soldiers at the tent entrance did not step away when she moved toward it. She was here because she was needed, not because she was free. She worked through the night. Wolfsbane venom this deep required a careful hand. Too much of the antidote too quickly would send the body into shock. Too little and the venom would simply continue. She had to measure by the color of the veins, by the steadiness of the pulse beneath her fingers, by the slight changes in his breathing. Elias was unconscious for the first 4 hours. Commander Celine checked in twice. She said very little each time. She looked at Valeria the way people look at something borrowed, useful for now but not trusted. Valeria kept working. Near dawn, Elias opened his eyes. He was quiet for a moment. He looked at the ceiling of the tent, then his head turned slowly and he looked at Valeria sitting beside him. She met his gaze. She did not speak first. "You stayed," he said. His voice was rough from the venom. "I made an agreement," she said. "I keep mine." He looked at her for a long moment. His golden eyes moved across her face without the calculating coldness she had seen in the courtyard. Whatever layer he wore in public, lying here with a wolfsbane wound and 2 hours of real sleep, it had thinned. "The tavern," he said, "is gone," she said. He was quiet again. Then, "The building used rebel courier lines. We tracked message drops through it for 8 months. I did not know that. I know." The 2 words landed strangely. She turned to look at him fully. He did not look away. "My informants confirmed the owners of the tavern were unaware. You were not the target, Valeria Nightflame. The operation inside your walls was." She stared at him. Something hot moved through her chest. Not grief. Something past grief. Something that did not yet have a name. Then you burned the home of an innocent woman, she said. He did not answer that. He looked back at the ceiling. His jaw was tight. She wanted to press it. She wanted to say everything that had been building in her chest since the moment she watched the western wall go down. But she had work to do, and she was disciplined enough to wait. She reached for his wrist to check the pulse. The moment her fingers closed around it, something happened. It was not subtle this time. A burst of warmth that moved up her arm and spread across her sternum. Not painful, not frightening, but completely, distinctly real, like touching a door and finding heat on the other side of it. Elias's eyes moved to where her hand held his wrist. She released it immediately. She picked up the cloth and the antidote mixture and continued working as if nothing had happened. But her heart was beating faster, and she could not explain why. Elias said nothing about it, but she noticed for the rest of that morning that his eyes returned to her again and again. Not with aggression, not with ownership. With something quieter than either, something that unsettled her more than either would have. He was watching her the way a person watches something they are trying to understand. Later, when his fever spiked again in the early afternoon, she stayed beside him and worked the fever down slowly. At some point his breathing steadied and his body relaxed. The nightmares that had been moving through him, she could see them in the tension of his face. The fists he made with his hands went still. He slept quietly when she was near. She told herself that was simply the antidote working. She told herself that a long time. It was deep evening when the fever finally broke completely. Elias opened his eyes, clearer this time. Stronger. He looked at her, then barely above a whisper, still half under the pull of the venom, he said a word she almost missed. Mate. Valeria went very still. She told herself he was confused. Fevered, that the venom sometimes pulled strange things out of a mind that had no defenses left. She told herself that too. She stood up and stepped back from the bed. Outside the tent, soldiers moved past on their rotations. The campfire crackled. The night was cold and clear. Valeria stood just inside the tent entrance with her back to the sleeping king, and she thought about the word he had said. She thought about the warmth in her hand. She thought about the fact that his nightmares stopped when she stayed close, and she told herself it meant nothing. She was not entirely sure she believed it. Chapter 3, The Truth Beneath the Ashes. They let her see Kale the following morning. He was held in a secure tent at the eastern edge of the camp, guarded by 2 soldiers who looked at Valeria briefly and then stepped aside without being told to. She was beginning to understand that a word had been passed through the camp about her. She did not yet know what word, but doors were opening before she reached them. Kale was seated on the ground, wrists bound in front of him. He looked up when she entered. For a moment they only looked at each other. She had known King Nightfang for 5 of the 7 years she had spent building Moonveil Tavern. He had arrived early on, a quiet traveler who asked for nothing and helped with everything. He fixed broken furniture. He carried supply crates up from the valley road without being asked. In the winters when the tavern traffic slowed and the loneliness grew heaviest, he would sit across from her by the fire and make her laugh with stories she was fairly certain he invented as he went. She had trusted him more than almost anyone. She looked at him now, and the person she had known and the person sitting in front of her did not quite fit together. "How long?" she asked. Kale did not pretend he did not know what she was asking. 3 years, he said. 3 years. She had been carrying supply lines and rebel message drops inside her walls for 3 years, and she had not known. "You used my kindness as a hiding place," she said. "Valeria, you made my kindness into camouflage." He looked down. His jaw was set. He did not argue the point. Whatever else he was, King Nightfang was not a man who lied when it no longer served a purpose. "The rebel cause is real," he said quietly. "The packs in the southern territories are starving. The king's trade restrictions cut off half their supply routes. People were dying, Valeria. Not slowly, quickly. Children. I know there is a war," she said. "I built a place where people from every side of that war could sit together without bleeding. That was my answer to it. And you used that answer as a tool." He looked at her. His eyes were tired and honest. Neutrality never truly exists. Every space that welcomes everyone gets used by someone. I just made sure the right side got more use of yours. She left without another word. She walked back through the camp slowly. The morning was sharp and gray. Frost covered the ground. She passed soldiers breaking down equipment, a group of younger officers going over maps, a cook stirring something over a low fire. She was thinking about what Kale had said. Not the parts about the rebel cause. She understood those well enough. She had seen the hungry travelers herself, had fed them without asking questions. The part she kept returning to was simpler and harder. Neutrality never truly exists. She was still thinking about it when she ducked back into Elias's tent without meaning to go there specifically. Her feet had simply taken her there. He was awake. Sitting up, which he should not have been doing, one hand pressed to his side. "You should lie down," she said. "I have been lying down for 12 hours. The venom is not fully cleared." He looked at her. Then he moved his hand from his side and laid back slowly, like a man making a concession he finds personally insulting. She checked his pulse, checked the wound, said nothing for a while. Then he said, "You saw him." "Yes, what did he tell you?" She thought about how to answer. "He told me neutrality is a comfortable lie." Elias was quiet. She glanced at his face and found it unexpectedly open, not soft exactly, but not guarded the way it was in public. "He is not entirely wrong," Elias said. She looked at him. "I have made choices in this war that I cannot undo," he said. His voice was measured, but there was weight beneath it, the kind that comes from carrying something a long time. Decisions made in the middle of impossible hours. Some of them I understood at the time. Some of them I told myself I understood. He stopped. "Your tavern was not the only thing that burned because of orders I gave." She sat down in the chair beside the bed. This was not what she had expected from him. She had built a version of Elias Thornclaw in her mind over the years, cold architect, unmoved by consequence. The person beside her now was more complicated. He was exhausted in a way that went all the way down. "The throne came to me after my father died," he said. "I was 22. The rebel coalition had already begun forming in the south. The council gave me one piece of advice that first week." He paused. "They told me that a king who hesitates loses everything, so I learned never to hesitate." "That is not the same as being right," she said. "No," he agreed. "It is not." The silence between them was different now. Not the silence of enemies facing each other. Something else, something more careful. The kind of silence that exists between people who are starting to see each other accurately. Valeria stood to leave. She straightened the supply cloth on the table beside him. She picked up a lantern that had burned out and set it aside. She was almost to the tent entrance when she realized what she had been about to do. She had been about to reach across and brush the back of her hand across his forehead to check for residual fever. She had reached halfway without thinking. She pulled her hand back. She did not look at him. She stepped outside into the cold morning and stood very still in the frost. Her pulse was uneven. She said very quietly to no one, "What is happening to me?" Chapter 4, The Bond They Cannot Escape. On the third night, the fever returned. It came back without warning. Valeria was asleep on a cot at the far edge of the tent when the sound of labored breathing woke her. She crossed to him in seconds, pressed her palm to his forehead, and felt the heat roll off him in waves. This was not the venom alone. This was something else, the kind of fever that comes when a body has been fighting too long and the will to keep fighting starts to loosen. She worked quickly. Cold compresses. A secondary antidote mixture for the residual poison. She sat beside him through the whole night, measuring his breathing, watching the veins at his throat, adjusting the compress every time the heat spiked. Around the second hour, he began to pull at the blankets in his sleep. Around the third, his face tightened the way faces tighten when nightmares get heavy. She did not think about what she did next. She simply reached out and placed her hand flat over his chest. The nightmare stopped, not slowly. Immediately, his breathing evened, his face released. His hands unclenched from the blankets and lay still. She sat there with her palm against his chest and felt his heartbeat steady beneath her fingers, and she did not move her hand away. She told herself it was practical, that a calm body healed faster, that she was managing a medical situation. She kept her hand there for a long time. By dawn, the fever had broken. She was still in the chair when Elias opened his eyes, and this time he was fully present, clear, no fever haze. He looked at her the way a man looks when he has stopped managing what his face is doing. The silence between them was different this morning, thinner. "You were here all night," he said. "The fever came back. I know, I was aware of it." A pause. "I was also aware of when it stopped." She looked at the supply table. She picked up a cloth and set it back down. She was doing things with her hands to keep from answering. "Valeria." Her name in his voice had stopped sounding like a summons somewhere in the middle of the last 3 days. She did not know exactly when. That bothered her more than she expected. She looked at him. "I am not going to force a conversation you do not want," he said. "But I am not going to perform ignorance about what is happening either. That is not how I operate." "You burned my home," she said. "I know. You stood in the snow and watched it fall, and you did not move. I know. So whatever you are feeling," she stopped, her jaw tightened. "You do not get to name it and expect me to simply receive it." He did not argue. He did not push. He held her gaze and said nothing, and somehow that was harder to stand than an argument would have been. stood up and walked to the tent entrance. She stood there with her back to him. Her hand was on the canvas. The cold morning was coming in at the bottom. She was going to walk out. Then his voice came, quiet, no performance in it at all. "I would rather lose the bond than force your choice." She stopped breathing for a moment. She did not turn around. But she did not leave. She stood there with the cold on her face and something in her chest pulling in a direction she had been refusing to look at for 3 days. The warmth every time she touched him. The nightmares going still under her hand. The half-step she had taken toward him in the frost 2 mornings ago without deciding to move. She turned around. She walked back. She stood in front of him with her arms crossed and the anger still visible in her face. She was not hiding it, would not hide it. But underneath it something else had been pressing upward for days and she was running out of room to hold it down. She looked at him for a long time, at the exhaustion behind his eyes, at the way he was holding himself completely still, the way a man holds still when he is afraid any movement will break something. She had not expected him to be afraid of anything. Something cracked open in her, the quiet kind, the kind that rearranges. She crossed the remaining distance between them and she kissed him. There was nothing soft about it. There was anger in it, and grief, and 3 days of sleeplessness, and the particular fury of feeling something you did not choose and cannot stop. She grabbed the front of his shirt and she kissed him like it was the last argument she had left. And then everything inside her exploded open, not metaphorically. Physically, a wave of heat and recognition that moved from her hands to her chest to the base of her spine. Like a door she had been leaning against her whole life had suddenly swung wide, and there was warmth and light on the other side, and she had not known it was there. She pulled back. Her hands were still gripping his shirt. She was breathing fast. She looked at his face and it was completely, entirely unguarded. His golden eyes wide, not frightened, undone. She let go of his shirt. She stepped back. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth and said nothing for a long moment. Then she turned and walked out. She walked past the tent rows and the fire pits, and 2 soldiers who glanced at her and quickly looked away. She walked until she reached the far edge of the camp where the tree line began, and the sounds of the camp fell back to a low murmur. She stood in the frost and pressed her palm flat to her sternum. The warmth was still there. It had not faded. It did not feel like it was going to fade. She needed to know what she was dealing with. She needed someone who would be straight with her. She turned and walked to the holding tent. Cale looked up when she entered. He read her face in 1 second the way he always had, and that skill now felt like one more thing he had used without her permission. She did not sit. "The mate bond," she said. "Can proximity manufacture it? Can the wolfsbane venom cause it? Can fear or stress create the feeling artificially?" Cale was quiet for a moment, then no, to all of it. The bond is not something that grows from exposure. It is a recognition of something that was always there. You either carry it for someone or you do not. Nothing creates it. Nothing fakes it. She stared at him, Valeria. His voice went careful. "Who is it?" She could not say it out loud, not yet. Saying it made it a thing that existed in the world outside her own chest, and she was not ready for that. She walked out. The frost crunched under her boots all the way back across the camp. She stopped outside Elias's tent. She stood there with one hand on the canvas and her head tipped down. Inside she could hear nothing. He was not moving. He was probably sitting exactly where she had left him, waiting in that still way he had. The bond pulled quietly in her chest, warm, patient, steady. Like a fire that had already decided it was not going out. She did not go back in, but she did not walk away either. She stood in the cold between those 2 choices, and she understood, with a clarity she was not grateful for, that the decision had already been made somewhere inside her. She just needed time to say it out loud. Chapter 5. The woman the king chose. Rumors moved through military camps the way smoke moves through cracks. By morning, every soldier, officer, and advisor in Elias Thornclaw's camp had heard something. The stories varied in the details, but the center of all of them was the same: the tavern woman, the king's mate. Valeria heard the whispers without reacting to them. She had lived through hard things by keeping her attention on what was directly in front of her. She was still doing that now. What was directly in front of her that morning was a council meeting she had not been invited to, and could hear anyway because Elias's tent walls were not built for privacy. Commander Celine Darkmoon was making an argument. "The prisoner attacked you with a poisoned blade," Celine said. Her voice was careful and precise. "He is a confirmed rebel coordinator. Execution is not only justified, it is required. The packs across every territory are watching how you respond to this. Mercy in this instance will be read as weakness." Elias's voice came back low and even. "It will be read as the exercise of authority. They will not see the distinction. They will when I explain it. A pause. Then Celine said more quietly, the woman's influence on you is visible, Elias. The council is concerned. The council's concern is noted, he said. My decision stands. Cale Nightfang will not be executed. Commuted sentence. Labor service to the Crown in the Eastern Territories. Valeria stepped back from the tent and stood in the open air. He had kept his word. She had expected him to. He had said it in the courtyard, and she had taken his word seriously enough to press her hands to his wound and work through the night. But hearing it confirmed, hearing him hold that line even with his commanders pushing against him, settled something inside her she had not realized was still unsettled. She found out later that afternoon from a young soldier who seemed to genuinely not understand that he was giving her information she was not supposed to have, that Elias had gone to the council chambers directly after the medical tent, stated his decision in front of 32 officers and advisors. He had not softened it. He had not framed it as strategy. He had said simply that Cale's life was the agreed price for the king's own life, and that he honored agreements. When word reached the general camp population, the reaction was mixed. Some soldiers disapproved. Others said nothing but watched Valeria with different eyes than they had before, not as a prisoner, not as a tool, with something closer to consideration. Commander Celine appeared at Valeria's side late that afternoon near the water station. She did not look at Valeria while she spoke. She kept her eyes on the camp. I want to understand you, Celine said. It was not a threat. It was a straightforward statement from a practical woman. What do you want to know? Valeria asked. What you want from this, to go home? Celine looked at her then. You no longer have a home, then I want to rebuild one. And the king? Valeria was quiet. The bond is not something either of you chose, Celine said. I know that, but it is also not something that disappears, because it is inconvenient. I have served Elias Thornclaw for 9 years. I have watched him make decisions in the worst hours of this war that would have broken most men. He is not easy, he is not warm. But he is honest, and he has never once taken something from a person without believing it was necessary. He believed it was necessary to take everything from me, Valeria said. Yes, Celine said. And I think he knows now that he was wrong about the woman who stood in that courtyard. She paused. I am not asking you to forgive him. I am telling you that the man waiting in that tent is not performing anything. He is not working an angle. Whatever he is feeling, it is real. She walked away. Valeria stood at the water station for a long moment. That evening, she returned to Elias's tent. He was sitting up, reviewing maps spread across his lap, still healing, still clearly not supposed to be working, completely ignoring that fact. He looked up when she entered. She sat down. I heard the council meeting, she said. He folded the map. I know, the walls are thin. You did not have to hold that position publicly. I gave my word, he said. That is not conditional. She looked at him. The anger was still there. She was not going to pretend otherwise. He had burned her home. He had stood in that courtyard and watched 7 years of her life collapse, and no number of good decisions afterward would fully erase that image. But there was something else there too now. Something she was done pretending she could not see. I am not ready to forgive you, she said. I am not asking you to be, but I am also not going to keep pretending that nothing has changed. She held his gaze. Because something has, and I think we both know it. He looked at her steadily. The gold of his eyes was warmer in the lantern light. He was quiet for a moment in the way he was always quiet before he said something he meant completely. You are not a burden I carry, Valeria, he said. You are the reason I still stand. She did not answer that, but she did not leave either. She picked up a cloth and reached forward and checked his wound without being asked. He let her. Outside, the camp settled into its evening routines. Fires were lit. Guards changed positions. The night came in cold and clear across the Frostfang Ridge. Inside the tent, 2 people who had every reason in the world to be enemies sat together in the lantern light, and neither of them spoke. And neither of them moved away. Valeria was thinking about leaving, not escaping, just stepping back, before the bond pulled any tighter. Before she found herself too deep inside something she could not name clearly yet. She had been thinking about it for 2 days. By the next morning, she had decided. She rose before dawn. She wrapped herself in her traveling cloak. She gathered the few things she had. A small pack she had been given by a quiet soldier who seemed to feel personally guilty about the whole situation. She slipped out of the tent into the pre-dawn darkness. The forest line was 40 yards to the east. She walked toward it steadily. She had covered 20 yards when a hand closed around her arm from the shadows, not rough, firm, like someone who knew exactly how much force was needed and used no more than that. She spun around. It was not a soldier. A tall figure in gray and black, no royal insignia, face partly covered. A second figure appeared from her left, then two more from the tree line ahead. She understood in the same instant that she was not going to be able to fight her way out of this. The hand on her arm tightened slightly. A voice she had never heard said low and even, "Come with us, we are not going to hurt you." She looked back toward the camp, still dark, still quiet. The guard rotation was on the other side. "Who sent you?" she said. "Someone who wants the Alpha King to understand what it feels like to lose something." Then the forest swallowed her. Chapter 6. The war comes for her. They brought her to a stone hall, somewhere north of the borderlands. She could tell by the smell. Granite and cold river water and pine resin. No windows. Two guards at the door, torches on the walls. She sat on a wooden chair in the center of the room and waited. She was not afraid. She was furious. There is a difference. The man who entered did not look like what she imagined a rebel leader to look like. Ronan Blackwood was broad-shouldered, careful-eyed, middle-aged. He had the kind of face that had spent years being reasonable in unreasonable situations. He sat down across from her and folded his hands on the table. "You are unharmed," he said. "You grabbed me out of a forest before sunrise," she said. "The bar for unharmed is not reassuring me." A slight pause. Something in his expression acknowledged that. "We need the king to come to a table," Ronan said. "Not a battlefield, a table. Our packs have been bleeding for 3 years. The southern territories have lost more than the crown understands. We are not asking for his surrender. We are asking for a conversation." "Then send a messenger," she said. "We sent 4. They did not return." She was quiet. "You are leverage," he said. Simply and plainly. "We know what you are to him. We know about the bond. We are not going to hurt you. But we need him to know that what he refuses to protect through diplomacy, he will lose through other means." Valeria looked at him. "You realize that using a mate as leverage against an Alpha King is precisely the kind of thing that ends in fire." "We are counting on it," Ronan said. "Because when he comes, and he will come, we need him furious enough to abandon strategy and human enough to still listen." He stood and left her there. 2 hours passed, then 3. Then the walls of the stone hall shook. It was not an explosion, it was a presence. The kind of shudder that moves through old stone when something enormous and fast hits the exterior perimeter at full speed. The guards outside the door exchanged one look and both drew their weapons. The door did not open from outside. It came off its hinges. Elias Thornclaw stepped through the gap. He was not wearing the full armor. He had come too fast for the full armor. He wore the underplate and the cloak, and both were marked from a hard ride through rough territory. His golden eyes moved across the room in one sweep. They landed on Valeria. She had seen Elias controlled. She had seen him careful. She had even seen him in the early hours of the fever, stripped of his layers by illness. She had never seen him like this. There was no performance in his face. There was no calculation. Just something raw and undeniable that he was not bothering to hide. He crossed to her. His hand came up and his fingers pressed carefully to the side of her face. Checking, she realized. Checking for injury. Then his thumb moved across her cheekbone once, so briefly she almost missed it, and his hand dropped away. He turned to face the room. Ronan Blackwood was standing at the far end with 6 of his fighters. "You came," Ronan said. "Obviously," Elias said. His voice was back under control. The rest of him was not quite there yet. "We need negotiations," Ronan said. "Real ones. Not the terms your council has been sending. Actual, sitting at a table, acknowledging what we have lost discussions." Elias studied him. "You took my mate to force this conversation." "I did. If I agree to negotiate, what happens to her?" "She walks out that door with you," Ronan said. "Tonight." A long silence. Valeria watched Elias's face. She watched him process the calculation. The political cost of agreeing under duress, the precedent it set, the pressure from his council that would follow. She watched him work through all of it in the span of about 4 seconds. Then he said, "I will negotiate. In the open, neutral territory. My council, your representatives, no weapons within sight of the table." Ronan looked slightly surprised. He had expected more resistance. "One condition," Elias said. "The negotiations begin within the week. I will not give you time to regroup." "Agreed," Ronan said. The deal was struck. The room exhaled. Valeria stood up. And then a figure she had not noticed moved from the left side of the room. A rebel fighter, younger, unsteady, eyes too bright. She saw the blade in his hand, and she saw where it was aimed, and she understood in a single instant that he was not acting under orders. He was acting out of grief. The kind that makes a person stop thinking entirely. He moved fast. She moved faster. She stepped in front of Elias. The blade caught her across the upper arm, not deep but real. She felt the sting of it and then the warmth of blood. Everything stopped. The rebel fighter was tackled immediately by two of Ronan's own men. Ronan was already crossing the room. His face had gone white. "That was not sanctioned," he said tightly. Valeria stood very still. She had her hand pressed to her arm. It was not serious. She knew it was not serious. But Elias had gone a kind of quiet that was not calm. His hand came to the back of her arm, gentle and precise, guiding her hand away and looking at the wound himself. His jaw was set in a way that made every other person in the room take a small step back without quite knowing why. Then he looked at Ronan. "The negotiations still stand," Elias said, slow, controlled, with enormous effort, "but understand that what just happened will not be forgotten." "Understood," Ronan said. Elias kept his hand at her arm, his fingers curved gently around the wound site, and he guided her toward the doorway. Outside in the cold night air, Valeria breathed. She looked at the hand still at her arm. She looked up at his face. He was still working to level himself out. She could see it, the jaw, the slight tension in his chest. He was somewhere between the king and the man was right at the surface. She said quietly, "You burned one home to save a kingdom. Do not destroy another one trying to save me." He looked at her. "That is the second time you have told me what not to do," he said. "Because the first time you did not listen." Something shifted in his face, not a smile exactly, but close. He kept his hand at her arm as they walked toward where his riders waited. Above them the sky had opened up and stars ran all the way to the ridgeline. The frost was coming in. The borderland smelled of pine and distance. Valeria did not pull away from his hand. Chapter 7. The king who would not let her go. She woke Elias's chambers, not the camp tent. His actual chambers, a large stone room in the nearest royal garrison, thick wool blankets, a fire burning low across the room, morning light coming through a high window at an angle that told her it was already mid-morning. She lay still for a moment. The arm was bound clean. Her pack was on the chair near the door. Someone had brought dry boots and set them neatly beside it. She noticed those details the way she always noticed details, cataloging, assessing, making sure she understood her situation before she moved in it. Then she noticed Elias. He was in a chair near the window, not sleeping, not reading the document open across his knee, watching her. He had been watching her for some time. She could tell by how still he was. The particular stillness of a person who has been keeping vigil and does not know how to stop. She looked at him. He looked back. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "How long?" she said. "You slept through most of yesterday." His voice was rough. He had not slept. She could see it in his face. The particular hollowness of a night spent awake in a chair. The wound was not deep. "But your body had been running on nothing for a week. It decided to stop." She sat up slowly. She looked at her bound arm. She thought about the stone hall, the rogue rebel, the blade. She thought about the fact that she had stepped in front of it without thinking. That was the part she kept returning to. Not the pain of it. The wound was minor. She had treated worse. The part that stayed with her was the absence of deliberation. Her body had simply moved, as if protecting him had already become something her instincts had decided on without consulting the rest of her. She pressed her feet to the floor. She looked at the fire. "The negotiations," she said, "begin in 3 days. Ronan Blackwood confirmed this morning. Cale will sit at the rebel side of the table." He paused. "He sent you something." He held out a folded piece of paper. She crossed the room and took it. Cale's handwriting was small and careful, the way the handwriting of people who taught themselves to read always is. It said, "You built a place where people could sit without bleeding. Let someone else carry that for the whole kingdom for once. You have done enough alone. You have more than done enough." She stood there with the paper in her hands for a long moment. Something behind her sternum shifted. Not the bond, something older than that. Something that had been sitting in her chest since the war took her family. And she had come to the Frostfang borderlands with 2 scarred hands and the stubborn, unreasonable conviction that she could build something worth staying for. She had been carrying that alone for 7 years. She folded the paper carefully and held it. "He is not wrong," Elias said. She looked up. He had not moved from the chair. He was watching her with that open, unguarded look, the one that only appeared when they were alone, and there was nothing requiring management. She had come to know that look over the past weeks. It still caught her off guard every time. She sat down in the chair across from him. She looked at her hands in her lap. She looked at the fire. She looked at the window. Then she looked at him. "I need to say something," she said, "and I need you to let me finish before you speak." "All right." She took a breath. "I have been angry at you since the night you burned my tavern. I am still angry. That does not disappear because things changed between us. It does not work that way, and I would not trust it if it did. What you took from me that night was real, and the loss of it is real, and it is going to live somewhere in me for a long time." She stopped. "But I have also been watching you. Every day since that courtyard, I watched you hold the line on Kale in front of your full council. I watched you come through a rebel camp alone because someone had taken me. I watched you sit in that chair last night instead of sleeping because you could not make yourself leave." She held his gaze. "I did not expect you to be that person," she said. "I built a very certain version of you in my head after the fire, cold, calculated, uneachable. And you kept being something more complicated than that, and I kept being angry about it because it was easier to hate a simple man than to feel what I actually felt about the real one." Elias was very still. "So I need to say it plainly," she said, "because I have spent too many years being careful with words and I am tired of it." She leaned forward slightly in the chair. "I love you," she said. "Not because of the bond, not because fate decided it, because I watched who you are when no one is requiring anything from you, and the man I saw is someone worth choosing." She paused. "I am choosing him, I am choosing you, deliberately, with my eyes completely open to everything that happened and everything that still needs to be repaired." The room was very quiet. The fire shifted, a log settled. Outside, the garrison was going about its morning, voices, footsteps, the sound of horses being moved to water. Elias looked at her for a long moment. Then he did something she had not seen him do once in all the weeks she had known him. He looked away, not out of avoidance, out of the need to collect himself. She watched his jaw tighten and release. She watched him press 2 fingers briefly to his mouth. She watched a man who had spent his entire adult life performing control discover that he had run out of it. When he looked back at her, his eyes were bright in a way she had not seen before. "I did not know how to be known by another person," he said. His voice was steady but only just. "I spent 9 years making sure no one could reach me because everything I let myself care about became something that could be used against me or taken away." He stopped. "Then you walked into a burning courtyard and refused to cry in front of me, and I did not know what to do with you." She felt her eyes sting. She did not look away. "I am not going to give you pretty words," he said. "I do not have them, but I will tell you what is true. You are the first person in 9 years who made me want to be known." He held her gaze. "And I would burn down every decision I have ever made and start over before I would let you carry one more thing alone." The tear that came down her face was quiet. She did not reach up to stop it. She stood up. She crossed the small distance between the chairs. She sat on the edge of his and she put her arms around him, not dramatically, not desperately, quietly. "The way you hold something you are not going to let go of." His arms came around her. He held her with the same careful precision he applied to everything. Deliberate, measured, and underneath it all something enormous that had been waiting a very long time to be set down somewhere safe. They stayed like that for a while. Outside the window the morning continued. The garrison voices rose and fell. A bell rang somewhere below. The world was already moving toward the next thing. After a long while she pulled back slightly and looked at him. "The western wall of the tavern goes up first," she said. "It takes the most wind." Something moved through his face. The beginnings of a smile, small and real and completely unguarded. "Tell me what to do," he said. "I will do it." She looked at him. "You have never built anything." "No, then you are going to make mistakes, probably. And I am going to tell you when you are wrong. I expect nothing less from you." She stood up. She held out her hand. He looked at it for a moment. Then he took it. They left the garrison together in the early morning. No armor, no insignia, no ceremony. 2 people walking towards something they were going to build with their own hands. The site of Moonveil Tavern was cleared by the time they arrived. The ash and broken timber had been removed. The foundation stones were exposed, old and solid, the way things built to last always are underneath the damage. Valeria stood at the edge and looked at it. She had stood on this ground alone 7 years ago with 2 scarred hands and the stubborn belief that peace was worth building even when the world gave her no reason to believe it. She had been right then. She was more certain of it now. Workers arrived behind them, soldiers who had volunteered. 2 craftsmen from the nearest village who had been customers at the old tavern and came without being asked. Kale's letter in her pocket, the smell of pine and cold stone and new mortar. She picked up a stone from the cleared pile. It was cold and rough in her hand, real weight, the kind of thing you build with. Elias reached down and picked up one beside her. She looked at him. He looked at her. Then they set the first stones into the mortar together. Neither of them spoke for a while after that. The morning came up gold across the Frostfang Ridge, and the sound of building, steady, patient, stone by stone, replaced the sound of everything that had burned. After a long while, Valeria said, "Some homes are built from wood." She looked at the man beside her, at the stone in his hands, at his face in the morning light, open in a way the king never allowed himself to be in front of anyone else. "Others are built from the people who stay." He looked at her. He set another stone beside hers and kept going. And that was everything. That was exactly everything. And that is where we leave Valeria and Elias. Not at a perfect ending, at a beginning. Two people choosing each other. Not because fate demanded it, but because they decided that what was broken between them was worth the work of rebuilding. Now go back to that question we asked you at the start. Would you have saved him? After everything you just heard, has your answer changed? Drop it in the comments. We read every single one. If this story moved you, a like takes 2 seconds and it means everything to a channel like ours. And if you are not subscribed yet, now is the time. We put out stories like this regularly. Long, emotional, the kind that stay with you. We will see you in the next one.